Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we welcome Kirk Cameron, a well-known actor, producer, and advocate. Many of you may remember Kirk from his iconic role as Mike Seaver on Growing Pains, but his journey from Hollywood to becoming a voice for faith, family, and servant leadership is truly remarkable. In this episode, Kirk shares how he went from being an atheist to a Jesus follower and servant leader. He opens up about how his faith transformed his life and career, leading him to focus on projects that align with his values. He discusses his work in film, his commitment to the next generation, and how servant leadership has shaped his approach to life, both in the spotlight and behind the scenes. Kirk, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh man, great to be talking with you this morning.
I'm so excited. Obviously, when people think of you, they probably think of an actor, filmmaker. They probably know you write some. They know you speak some. They probably know a lot about you, but they might not know you.
Yeah.
Share with our audience a little bit of your journey of becoming famous, if you will, at a young age.
Yeah. My backstory as a kid growing up in Hollywood is fun for me to recount because, it's so unlikely. And I mean, Chris, I never wanted to be an actor in the first place. And even to this day, acting is not my passion. In fact, if I never acted again another day in my life, I really wouldn't mind at all. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who would say, Kirk, we wouldn't mind either because you're not very good. I actually wanted to be a doctor when I was a kid. I love math. I love science. I love biology. I even liked a little bit of history. And my father was a school teacher, and so were my grandparents. And so education was always a big thing on our radar. And acting just sounded like such a flimsy, crazy career path that I never had in mind. And when I was 9 years old, my mom said, hey, we're going to go down and see this talent agent because my friend has a son who's on a show called 8 is Enough. His name is Adam Rich. And he was there with Dick Van Patten and the whole family. And he was able to make some money doing commercials and TV stuff that he could save up for college. And so we're going to go down and try it. And I was like, come on, I want to go play basketball with my friends. I don't want to go be an actor. I can't sing. I can't dance. I can't do stuff like that. And we went down, and lo and behold, she signed me up, and I started working on McDonald's commercials, 409 Cleaner commercials, Cheerios commercials, Fruit Roll-Ups commercials. And then I landed the role of Mike Seaver on Growing Pains. And honestly, I kind of loathed the whole thing because my mom would pick me up from school. I couldn't go play sports with my friends. She had to brush my hair and put me in a nice little Izod polo shirt, kind of like the one you're wearing right now, and tuck in my shirt and drive for an hour and a half in traffic to downtown Los Angeles and audition for stuff. And I really didn't like it. But I eventually learned to kind of like it, and I was doing all right, and my mom said it was a really cool opportunity. So when I landed Growing Pains, I just was riding that train for about 6-7 years, and a lot happened to me during that time that convinced me that maybe I should stick with the acting thing. I eventually married the woman that I ended up marrying, and then I also had a massive worldview shift, and that all happened during those years of Growing Pains. And I'm so grateful for all of that as I look back on it now.
I mean, honestly, your journey is so fun from the outside. I know that it wasn't always easy.
Easy for you to say. You weren't the Teen Tiger Beat centerfold in magazines plastered to 14-year-old girls' walls growing up. I had my own growing pains for sure.
So how did you see, you had that shift in mindset somewhere in there. How did you see your faith come out? And how did you see, was servant leadership even a thing in Hollywood?
Well, if it was, I certainly wasn't aware of it. I'm sure that we could go to John Maxwell and we could go ask these guys that they were doing this long before I was even, doing anything. But at that time, I didn't have any faith. You asked how my faith came out. I mean, it wasn't like I was some closet Christian as a kid that eventually got bold when I was a teenager. I mean, my faith was in myself. I didn't believe in God. I was an atheist in Hollywood, California, up until I was about 18 years old and proud of it. I thought that Jesus was part of a different Trinity, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny, and God. Somewhere he was in there somewhere as this imaginary person that was born of a virgin and rose from the dead. And it just sounded like cuckoo to me. In fact, when I was a kid growing up, Christmas time was all about whether or not I would get a new surfboard that year, living in California, and about Santa Claus and the cookies. It had nothing to do with the nativity. I didn't even know who those three kings with the beards and the gold and frankincense and myrrh were, let alone why a baby was in a little feeding trough. So that didn't come into my world until I was 17 years old, when I met a really cute girl on the set of Growing Pains, and she invited me to visit her family over the weekend, and the address that she gave me to meet her at was a church. And I was not prepared for what I heard that morning. That really put me into a spin cycle and set me in a whole different direction philosophically.
I mean, ever since then, you've been leaning into it quite a bit. I mean, doing movies like Left Behind, movies like Fireproof, getting involved in Lifemark and coming up with that movie after you saw the story. Like, I mean, it seems like it rocked your world.
Yeah, it did. It did rock my world. It did rock my world, and it was really good that my world needed to be rocked. My self-centered, me first, know-it-all attitude needed to be punched in the face by truth and reality. And I'm so thankful for that young lady and her father and the resources that he gave me and the time that he spent to talk through some of my questions. Like, what happens when we die? What's out there when we step out of here? Is there really a heaven? Is there really a hell? How do you even know what religion is right? I had so many questions, and he was so kind to answer them as good as he could. And then he finally said, "Kirk, asking me about God is really, I'm happy to talk with you, but you need to go to God yourself. I mean, he's not just a nebulous force or an idea. He's not a figment of somebody's imagination. He actually made your ears and he can hear you. He made your eyes and he can see you. So you can talk to him." And he said, "You just got to go to him on his terms, which is humility and faith." Well, as an atheist, I didn't have either one. And so I'd actually had some crazy ideas about being, well, I won't even go into my crazy New Age beliefs, but I eventually found myself praying in the driver's seat of my sports car, parked on the side of the road, thinking about the fact that one day I would die and find out if there's a God and a heaven. And if there was a heaven, I knew I wouldn't be going, because I had essentially given the proverbial finger to religion and even the existence of God. And I thought, man, if this isn't all just a great big accident, if life has meaning, if truth, beauty, and goodness are actually valid concepts and not just imaginary constructs, and that being kind and loving is actually of real value over hatred and evil, then that requires a moral lawgiver and a transcendent moral law. And that requires something outside of me. And so I put all this together and realized that very smart people throughout history have believed in God, and that opened the door intellectually for me to begin to examine the claims of the gospel, of the scriptures, of the resurrection, compare that with all of the other claims. And I came to the conclusion that I had to get down on my knees and I ought to ask God to help me. And that changed the trajectory of my life completely.
Obviously, all of that journey led to you then having a totally new outlook on life. And it's interesting because a lot of what you're doing now is maybe wouldn't have happened without all of those experiences. Talk about what you're doing now to help kids learn about Jesus and how you just see that playing out in your daily life now.
Well, Chris, one of the things I appreciate about you is that you're not. I I don't know why everyone doesn't come to this conclusion, but eventually, I think if you've got your eyes open and you're paying attention to what's going on around you, like you do, like you are, you recognize that success in terms of financial wealth, in terms of popularity, power, influence, these things are exciting, these things are attractive, but they're also devastating to people that don't have a higher calling to do what's good and what's right. Think of Lord of the Rings. The ring had so much power. The ring has so much power that it corrupts the hearts of men. And so Frodo was able to grab a hold of this ring, but even he knew that it needed to be destroyed because ultimate power corrupts absolutely, right? And so we've got to get to something beyond success, and some people will call that significance or, some cause greater than themselves. And for me, I began to see that I wanted my life to count in a significant way, and that way ought to be fueled by gratitude, not personal ambition. And I have air in my lungs. My heart beats at night while I'm asleep. I have no idea how I got here. And I fell in love, and my wife and I have 6 children, and we have an opportunity to push back darkness and amplify light and do good things for the benefit of other people, for the honor of God, for the flourishing of humanity. Let's lean into that. And so I've recognized that, the time in the hourglass is running out. I'm 54 years old today. As we do this interview, I just became a grandfather. And so I want to lean into the next generation. And so I've been writing children's books of virtue and encouraging children to find value in humility rather than pride. We have an entire month devoted to pride in this country where we understand from the Bible, the book that built America, the book that is the prerequisite to understanding the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and the moral values of this country that made her so great, that pride is the mother vice that gives birth to every other form of wickedness. Why on earth are we promoting pride to children? I get it when I'm proud of my kids for doing something or doing a good thing. I get that. I think there's other words that we could use that would be more accurate. But pride gives birth to lust and greed and sloth and wrath and envy and every other one of the deadly sins. And I want kids to understand that humility is where the treasure is. I want to teach kids about love, joy, peace, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. That's the fruit of the Spirit working within your heart, the Spirit of God. And I want to teach kids how to love their enemies. So as I've written these books, I've gotten a lot of pushback from library directors that have been infected with the woke mind virus that would rather have me show up dressed in high heels, stockings, and a skirt as a drag queen and read to their children about, gay dinosaurs or something like that. And so this has led to a lot of fun stuff in the news and to an event called See You at the Library, which attracted 35,000 people this summer, simultaneously at their own public libraries, hosting story hours where parents and grandparents come to the public library, they sing like God Bless America, they pray, and they read books of character and virtue to their children that will lead to blessing and protection. So that's the stuff I've been up to. It's culminated in some more stuff like a kid's TV show and a brand new book, and we can talk about that stuff if you want to.
Yeah, even talk a little bit. I guess one of the things that I love about you and Chelsea, behind the scenes, you guys have had great influence on mine and my wife's life. We love what you're doing. But talk a little bit about what you've done with Campfire. I think it's a great example of you and Chelsea could have just kicked back and done nothing with your lives, right? After being in entertainment and film, and you've chosen to care for others and be servant leaders.
Well, thank you. That encourages me, and that affirms things that really put fuel in my tank. I don't think I could have just sat back and done nothing because we lived in California. It's really expensive out there. You got to work till you're like 90 just to afford gas in your tank. We actually live in Tennessee now, so it's a little easier on the checkbook, and we're closer to our grown adult children. Camp Firefly was something that my wife and I started when I was 19 years old. She and I had just met. We weren't even married yet, but I was meeting a lot of kids through the Make-A-Wish Foundation. These are kids who are terminally ill with cystic fibrosis and cancer, other sicknesses, and their wish through Make-A-Wish or Starlight was to come to the set of Growing Pains and meet the cast, maybe take a picture and get an autograph. Well, we wanted to do more than that. Our heart went out to them, and so we decided, wouldn't it be cool if we could get the dads off work and get the whole family together and give them an all-expense-paid dream vacation somewhere where they could make memories that would last them a lifetime. And not just Disneyland, but something more intimate, something that would be more memorable, and get them together with other families who could understand and empathize with what they were going through. We called it Camp Firefly. We held it in Georgia, and every summer we invited 6 families from St. Jude's Hospital, from hospitals in Texas, New York, North Carolina, and we had an all-expense-paid 7-day vacation with mom's makeover, queen for a day, dad's golfing, lots of time around the campfire and the jacuzzi and the pool to talk and share stories. We had chapel services. We've got Hawaiian luau's and Mexican fiestas, bike rides through the azalea forests, and just time for us to talk about the things that matter in life. It's called Camp Firefly, and we've been running this camp, hosting it as volunteers for the last 34 years, 35 years now. And it's one of the most important and beautiful weeks of our entire year.
So I think a lot of people listening to this, they might find personal success in the things they're doing and just be okay with that. Well, what's the drive behind you and Chelsea deciding to be servant leaders and go care about others?
One of the things that my wife often said to my children, there's a few things, say please and thank you. And if you don't say please, you don't get it. If you don't say thank you, you don't keep it. That kind of stuff. Feel free to use that with your kids, by the way. But other ones were me, misery, others, joy. That's a maxim that we ought to have written down somewhere or memorized. If I focus on me, self-empowerment, self-realization, self-centeredness, self, me equals misery. And you think of the most self-focused people in the world, they tend to be unhappy people who just can't satisfy the me monster. But others, joy, is focusing on serving somehow brings joy. I got everybody calling me. Sorry about that. And we know that that's true. Jesus himself said, he did not come to be served, but to serve. He said it's more blessed to give than it is to receive. And turns out it's true. It's actually true. And it's a daily struggle, but that's my morning prayer. Lord, make me a servant, because it's in serving others is where the treasure is.
It seems like you've been given such a unique platform even these days. I know you're hosting a show on TBN. Share a little bit about that journey and what Takeaways is all about.
Sure. Thank you. TBN was one of those religious channels when I was a young man that I wouldn't touch it with a 1,000-foot pole. I mean, they had guys with really weird comb-over hairdos in 3-piece pinstripe suits with big diamond rings on their fingers, and it was part of the religious group that I just thought was off the rails. And there still are plenty of religious people who are off the rails, but TBN made a shift in their programming and asked me to host a show where I could talk to pastors, astronauts, storytellers, filmmakers, songwriters, athletes, atheists, relationship experts. And that turned into a TV show called Takeaways on Monday nights on the Trinity Broadcast Network that I've been doing now for 3 years. And it is wonderful. I meet so many interesting people. I get to talk with them, and all of them are servant leaders. All of them are people who are using their gifts, talents, resources, and relationships to further the good, to keep darkness and evil in check. And it's done it through so many different disciplines that it gives me great courage.
I love the variety of stuff you're involved in. Share a little bit about one of the decisions you made to start a children's TV show more recently.
Okay. Well, after I wrote my first children's book and was denied by over 50 woke libraries from being able to read it there, and these are the same libraries that already approved drag queens coming to read children's books to kids, we pushed back so much that it became a national movement to restore wholesome story hours in libraries. And we thought, what's the next logical step? Well, let's turn these books with great stories and characters into a TV show for kids. And I was hearing things from parents like, what happened to Mr. Rogers? Where's the great TV shows for kids that help them process the difficult things going on in the world? And today, kids are dealing with crazy stuff that Mr. Rogers never had to deal with. Although I bet he had foresight and knew it was coming. He dealt with things like racism, and he dealt with things like divorce and helping kids process that. But today, kids are processing whether or not men can give birth. And they're trying to process whether or not they're racist simply because they were born with white skin. It's really insane, the things that are going on today. And so we created a new TV show called The Adventures of Iggy and Mr. Kirk. And it's the show about me, Mr. Kirk, raising a little 5-year-old iguana named Iggy. And it's think of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, only modernized with beautiful animation, high energy, hilarious dialogue, celebrity guest stars coming in from former Disney shows like Good Luck Charlie and others. And we're teaching children about faith, hope, and love. We're putting them to bed at night with stories that are going to teach them about kindness, joy, faithfulness, and self-control, bravery and humility, and others first. And there's lullabies and questions that kids get to ask of Iggy and Mr. Kirk through the YouTube channel. And so it's interactive, and it's just going to be a fantastic tool that we hope becomes a staple tool in parents' toolboxes as they help their kids navigate this crazy culture.
I think one of the fun things that's just, and I keep saying it, but it's so fun to see you do this. You're finding all these areas of culture that would be great to make a difference in, and you're getting involved. Talk a little bit about American Campfire Revival and what you were doing there, what you have been doing, because you're really helping people become better servant leaders there.
Sure. Well, thank you for mentioning that. American Campfire Revival was something that was birthed out of a very frustrating, discouraging time for me several years ago. After COVID hit and Trump told everybody it's 15 days to flatten the curve, stay home, that turned into months. And in California, we were literally under house arrest by our governor. We couldn't leave to go anywhere. You couldn't go to church. You couldn't go to get your hair cut. You couldn't go anywhere. And understandably, we didn't know what COVID was all about. But we all smelled a rat when the governor was at the French Laundry having dinner with all of his friends, not having masks. And then the weed shops were open, the abortion clinics and the liquor stores were open, but you couldn't go have communion on Friday night before Easter, even though you were disinfected and 25 feet away from the next human being. And riots were breaking out in the streets, and they're like, we hear your rage, your rage is real, go. It was like, what's going on? And so in my backyard, watching the election fiasco and then the new president come into office, everyone was wondering what the first 100 days of the administration would be about. And I said, well, instead of just being on the defense and watching the world crumble around us, why don't we get on the offense as the family of faith and come up with our own 100-day plan? And so I made 100 consecutive campfires in my backyard because I couldn't go anywhere. And I went on YouTube, I went on Facebook Live, and I said, the scriptures say that if we humble ourselves and we pray and we seek God's face and we turn from our own wicked ways, that he will hear our prayers. He'll forgive our sins and heal our land. Well, that's what we need right now. So I invite you to join me. And it was called the American Campfire Revival. We prayed, we admitted our faults, and we looked to God to guide us into the future by trying to understand the backstory of America and what made this nation the freest, strongest, most blessed country in the world in record time. And you know what it comes down to? It came down to faith and goodness. We've strayed greatly from those founding principles. And every time we do, we suffer. And we're suffering now. And that was my hope, was that we could look back to help us move forward to better days ahead in America.
Well, I know millions of people have seen that, been impacted. I know you went on tour. How much did that have to do, if anything, with some of the new stuff you're doing now with the book coming out, Born to Be Brave?
Yeah, well, it all sort of comes together. I'm so grateful that I don't have a real job. It's funny. I've often wondered what I'm going to do when I grow up. I wanted to be a doctor, but I ended up being an actor. I wanted to be an atheist. I ended up being a Christian. I think I wanted to always stay young. Now I'm a grandpa. Who thought Mike Seaver would have a beard? Everything that has happened in my life was not a result of my own planning and architecting. God has always had better plans. And so all of these things are coming together in a new book that I wrote called Born to Be Brave. Why? Because I find that there is a spirit of fear and timidity, of an attitude of apathy, complacency, and even hopelessness, and particularly within the family of faith. Religious people on the Bible Christian side of things, many of them feel that there is this inevitable decline of culture that will result in a great ball of fire here on earth because the book of Revelation predicts it. I think it does not. I think that's a misunderstanding. And the result has been this self-fulfilling prophecy that the people who can make the greatest difference in the world don't believe it's worth trying for the long haul because they think we're just postponing the inevitable. And I wanted to throw my hat into the ring and say, that's crazy. We, as God's faithful followers who have put our faith in his son, Jesus, who know that God is good and he's working all things together for good for those who love him, has a plan. And he's given us a birthright of courage. This isn't about trying to follow religious rules. This is about faith working itself out through love. And if we do that with some steel in our backbone and a vision of victory, we can and will realign this nation and any nation with heaven's values that leads to blessing and protection for generations. It's called Born to Be Brave, How to Be a Part of America's Spiritual Comeback. And it includes everything I've been learning over the last 4 years about faith, hope, and love, and putting that stuff into action through courage.
You always find yourself in these interesting places where there's a lot of controversy. Things like what you're saying with the book don't sound like they should be controversial necessarily, but I know that there's a lot of controversy around it and some of the other things that you talk about. How do you see yourself live out a life of servant leadership amongst all this controversy and wanting to be bold while at the same time wanting to serve? Do those coincide? Do they conflict?
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's difficult. I mean, there are easier paths that we can all take. especially if you're a talented person, or you've been resourced well with money or relationships, and you could just pursue a path of personal gain and ease and comfort, which, I've got a great cup of coffee and a pork butt on my Traeger grill outside. I'm planning on an enjoyable day. But at the end of the day, there are problems in the world and people who are suffering, and our children are growing up into a world that is going to be a dumpster fire if we don't own up to some of the mistakes that we have made and get involved and jump on the political problems with both feet and deal with the economic problems and the faith problems and the family disintegration and going on in our neighborhoods and communities. We've got to do that stuff, or we're just being irresponsible. I would say it's morally reprehensible to say that you're patriotic or that you're devoted to the family and then just sit back and not look at dealing with problems that need to be solved. And that's why I think I find myself in controversial areas, is because I want to find out where there is a hurt and I want to heal it. I want to find out where something's broken and I want to fix it. I do that with my house. If I got a roof leak, I'm not going to sit here. I want to do that in my marriage. If my wife's leaving me, I better get on that and figure out what it is that I've done or what she thinks I did. And when it comes to cultural things, we've got issues that we have to deal with. So I want to do what I can, where I can, to make a difference. Chris, could I just drop a little Middle-earth wisdom on this topic from Gandalf the Grey? Gandalf often would say to Frodo, who was upset about the evil in their time, that it was not up to them to decide what evil they had to deal with. It was up to them to decide how they were going to deal with the evil. And he said this to him. He said, "Other evils there are that shall come, for even Sauron himself is but a servant or an emissary. Yet it is not our task to master all the tides of the world. It cannot be done, but rather to do all that is in us for the help of these years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields we know, so that those who live after us will have clean earth to till. What weather they shall have is not ours to rule." I think he's exactly right. You and I cannot extinguish all the evil of the world, but it would be irresponsible and reprehensible to ignore it and the suffering of other people. But what we can do is do everything while we have breath in our lungs to uproot evil in fields we know, in the world of tech, in the world of entertainment, in the world of finance and government and church and family. Where there are nefarious forces, let's uproot them and expose them. And by the way, I've got more demons in my heart and snakes in my head then I could keep myself busy with just that alone, to not be selfish and prideful and all of those kinds of things. And that's why I need God's help. And then I want to begin to heal my family and my community and starting local and work its way out. I think that is what we've been tasked to do, so that our children and grandchildren, those who live after us, will have cleaner earth to build their lives on. And they'll know how to deal with the political, economic, spiritual, and moral storms that come their way. Why? Because they grew up with a dad who had his eyes open, paid attention, and did what he could do to advance the good. And a mom who valued the sacred role of motherhood and being a wife and taking care of her family. And grandparents who didn't just spend the rest of their sunset years collecting seashells on the beach, but supported their children and grandchildren as they try to bring a little bit more of heaven to earth. That's why we've got to get involved in messy places.
I think a lot of people are willing to talk about the messiness, and anyone is willing to be critical of the messy places in society, no matter where people are. You bring up an interesting concept that sounds almost like start with the closest concentric circles and work out.
100%.
how do you see that actually play out? And what advice would you give to people who are like, gosh, I want to do something, but I don't even know where to start?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my book, Born to be Brave, it's exactly what I try to lay out, because I've heard so many really smart people with values say things that sound really good. You know, I love listening to Jordan Peterson. I'll listen to Dennis Prager. I'll listen to 100 other people on the right, on the left, in the middle. It's fun watching that show Middle Ground. I don't know if you've seen it. Jubilee puts on this show, and they've got people, talking on both sides of an issue. And it's fascinating how many really smart people there are out there with completely different values. And what I have found is that the underlying presuppositions of a person are everything. Someone once said, what good is it if you climb to the top of the ladder and then you discover that the ladder was leaned up against the wrong building? Uh-oh, right? You did a great job. You built a great ladder and you climbed all the way up, but it's the wrong building. Oh no. So we've got to understand the ground we're standing on. And what I've learned is that you've got to start with your own heart, and your own heart will deceive you if you are not submitted to the one who made you. And as an atheist, that's impossible to understand. But when I came to a place of saying, God, help me be the person you created me to be, expose the filth and the corruption and the deception that I've willingly brought onto myself, and help me see clearly and do what's right and good, I came to the conclusion that Jesus was right. The best thing you could possibly do with your life is to love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and to love other people the way you would like for them to love and care for you. And so the strategy's got to be first in my heart. That's where I uproot evil and plant seeds of truth and goodness and beauty. Then in my home, with my wife, my spouse, my children. Then in my local community. And that's where the most effective political strategies and policies take place, is locally. You can affect a lot of change locally, much more so than you can by just looking to Washington, D.C. Work your way out through your church, through your community, through the works of your hands and your vocation to do as much good as you can. And if you're successful, if you're a leader, you've got influence. But it was said by a famous Dutch theologian, Hugo Grotius, in the 1600s. He said, a man cannot govern a nation if he can't govern a state. He can't govern a state if he can't govern a county. And if he can't govern he can't govern a county, if he can't govern his own town. And if he can't govern a town, he certainly can't govern his own family. And a man who can't govern his own family is lost if he doesn't learn how to first govern himself. And he can't even govern himself if he doesn't submit himself to God. So it's got to start at your house and work its way up to the White House. Servant leadership must start in your heart, move to your home, to the works of your hands, and then out to the halls of Congress. It's like that pebble in the lake that has concentric circles that work its way out. It's a tiny pebble, but it can make a difference on the shores of the entire lake. That's the way to get it done. It's playing the long game, and it's leading by example.
That's so good. I think there's so many good takeaways for people there. To start with themselves and work out from there. I want to hit you with 10 rapid fire questions where you say just the first thing that comes to mind, and there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah, well, in the public court of opinion, there are plenty of wrong answers. So I will try to be as unfiltered as possible, but it might be difficult for me. All right, go ahead, hit me.
Who's the first person you think of when I say servant leadership?
Servant leadership. Gosh, who am I? I'm going to think of Jesus. I did not come to be served, but to serve. And he is the leader of all leaders.
5 words that most describe yourself.
Then, this is crazy. Let's see. Undeserving, but grateful, learning, and deeply committed. That's 2 words, but I meant it as one. And hopeful.
Favorite author or book?
I'm struggling with that. There's so many good books out there. I can't think of one. One that I've been sort of noodling on lately. You got to help me with the author, but Animal Farm. Who was that? That wasn't Orwell. That was.
Oh, I'm blanking. So we'll go with that book. We'll just go with the book.
Yeah, Animal Farm. It's wow, Animal Farm, and what we see going on in culture today.
The irony, you're not the first person to say that as a book. It's extremely popular. Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? It's a Wonderful Life is one of my very favorite movies. And here's the thing, Chris, I don't watch many movies. I really don't I don't even have a TV, and I don't watch movies. So when I do, it's because my kids want me to. And we watched some Matthew McConaughey movies recently and some Denzel Washington movies recently. And I was like, wow, these guys are really good. And they're like, Dad, of course they're really good. We just watched The Book of Eli, and we watched The Free State of Jones with Matthew McConaughey. And Interstellar was pretty cool too. So, yeah, I like documentaries, but It's a Wonderful Life is certainly one of my favorites. I'm looking forward to watching it this Christmas.
I need to pause on the 10 questions because isn't it a little ironic that given your background, you don't have a TV and you don't watch tons of film?
Yeah. Yeah, right. You know what? I feel like there's just so many real life things to do than to watch stories and live vicariously. Although I think there is a legitimate place and purpose for stories. Jesus told stories. Storytelling is extremely powerful. The best lessons I've ever learned really were in the form of stories told to me. And that's why I want to write books and make movies. But I got 6 kids. I've got a grandchild. I've got a lawn to mow. I've got a Boston butt to roast for dinner tonight and games to play. So, and bills to pay. So I don't find myself playing much golf anymore or watching movies.
Are you allowed to answer the question of what's your favorite movie you've been in?
Well, yes. So it's not Left Behind.
Okay.
I'm a little embarrassed for a couple of reasons. One, because I don't think I'm really a very good actor, and I have some serious qualms about the theology and the premise of the whole movie. But favorite movie, Fireproof might have been my favorite. The movie about marriage that was produced by the Kendrick brothers. I also made a documentary called Monumental, which was very impactful for me when I took a trip to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and learned about our forefathers and foremothers, the Pilgrims.
Wow. Okay. Back to the questions. That's good. Favorite food.
Favorite food. Well, I've been on the living a carnivore lifestyle, a la Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson and hundreds of thousands of others for the last year and 5 months. So my favorite meal is going to be a New York strip steak with, probably a hamburger patty next to it, and maybe some lamb chops next to that, with some fried eggs and a glass of water.
Love that. Favorite thing to do in your free time?
I love to be outside. I try to spend more time outside than inside. And so I love to go on a walk, on a hike. I love to exercise, and I do that in various ways. I love to camp. I love to fish. So just get me outside, away from screens, and just let me smell the air and get my feet wet and my hands dirty.
Give me a surprising fact about you.
Well, I play the Native American wind flute.
Wow.
I bet you wouldn't have guessed that one.
No, that is a surprising fact. I love that.
And it's probably surprising to people that I have been eating a carnivore diet for the last year and a half. No one really saw me as a guy who needed to lose 100 pounds. Then they're right. And then also that I'm not a big fan of the Left Behind movie. I bet that's surprising for a lot of people.
That's true. The steak I knew because I've been with you eating steak, but the
right.
Left Behind I did not know.
Okay. and that I never wanted to be an actor.
Where's the favorite place you've ever been?
Favorite place with my wife, anywhere. But the place that I think that we would both write down on a, if we were playing the game Slate, I think it is, favorite place, I think we would both write Italy. And we went there on our honeymoon. 5 years after we got married, we went backpacking in the hill country of Italy, and it was awesome.
Where's somewhere you want to go that you have not been?
I want to go to Africa with my pastor. He started digging water wells and transforming communities and villages over there. And he's just one of my favorite humans on the planet. So I'd like to go there. And I'd probably like to go to Switzerland or Austria with my wife. I hear that's just beautiful over there.
Okay, and finally, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
These ultimate,
choose one. No.
Life principles. I know. I'm thinking of the Serenity Prayer. I'm thinking of the, do I go deep? Do I go funny? Where do I go here, Chris?
Give me one of both if you want.
Yeah. I made something up. Gandalf's got a lot of great advice, and so we could just go with Gandalf or a founding father. But there's for people who actually don't mind a little work, look up Psalm 118 verse 8. That's the actual center verse of all the verses of the Bible, and it's pretty central to living a significant and good life. Psalm 118 verse 8. But I'm going to say this. I made something up and I was like, how do I deal with my own personal responsibility and be able to deal with the big problems in the world that I personally can't control? Somebody once said this, Chris. They said, I wake up every morning torn between two strong desires, to savor the world and to save the world, which makes planning my day very difficult. I relate to that. I'm like, how can I enjoy the little things and then still recognize that the world is on fire and people need to help? And I came up with these concentric circles, and I said, small, medium, large, and then really big. And I said, I'm going to wake up in the morning and savor the small. I'm going to savor this cup of coffee and the roses I can smell in the garden in my backyard and the smile on my granddaughter's face. I'm going to savor the fact that I've been married to my wife for 35 years and she hasn't left me. Thank you, God. And then I'm going to make much of the media, that next size sphere of influence that I have, and that is my work. I'm going to give everything I've got to Chris and this podcast right now. I'm not going to hold back, and I'm going to just do all that I can to advance what is good and right and true. Then I'm going to let go of the large. When I watch the presidential candidate debate, when I look at what's going on with the World Economic Forum, when I look what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, I have to recognize, okay, I'm not going to influence the billions of dollars that are going over to be a part of wars that we should or shouldn't be in. Maybe if I was a senator and a lawmaker, maybe that would be part of my sphere of influence, but right now it's not. And so I'm going to let go of things that other people are deciding that I have no influence over. And then I'm going to celebrate the cosmic. The largest circle of all is that where God dwells, and he is the sovereign in control of everything from the throne room of heaven. If God is working all things together for the good of those who love him and who are the called according to his purpose, then I can say, you know what? It's okay. I can savor the small, make much of the medium. I can let go of the large that I have no control over, and I can celebrate that God is in his heaven and that things are going to work out. And the end of the narrative is one that's going to make us stand up and shout and say amen.
Wow, what a great note to end on, and some great advice. Thank you for being a part of this. Thanks for sharing with our audience. I'm sure they love to see behind the scenes of Mike Seaver and get to know you a little bit better too.
Chris, it's great to talk with you. I so appreciate you and the way that you're leveraging all of your influence and talking about the necessity for leaders to be servants. And That's what I want to be. So thanks for having me on your program.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Servant Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to never miss an update. Be sure to check out the servantleadershippodcast.org for more updates and additional bonus content.